on average, when it comes to cold outreach on a daily, weekly basis, what are you see? How much cold outreach do you get when it concerns? Obviously, you're working with a big company like Coca-Cola, and so what does that look like from a weekly basis for you?
I'd say I usually get 3 to 6 emails a day. Not very many phone calls anymore. It seems like everyone tends to either stick to email or LinkedIn messages. So I'd say three to six outreaches per day.
Gotcha. And is it from like a number of different vendors? Like what is kind of the main thing? If you were to kind of pinpoint one or two things that people are trying to sell you, what are you seeing for the most part?
For the most part, being in learning and development, I get a lot of learning technology, but I also get a lot of recruiters like staff augmentation, talent agencies, things like that. Like we have got talent, we can help you upskill your staff, that kind of stuff. But I think those are the two main ones. Any kind of new L&D technology, and then staff augmentation.
Sure, sure. Is there um is there anything that really stands out to you when it comes to cold outreach that is kind of annoying or something that is like an instant turnoff for you?
The biggest one for me is people that make assumptions when they email. I got one today asking about, how do we upskill our HR executives? And like, I'm not in HR at all, so I have no business in that. It's going to be a failed outreach for that purpose. So those assumptions that people just see the title and they think, oh, I'm going to reach out to this person because they may have something to do with what I'm trying to sell. But those are instant turnoffs for me.
Would you say that one of the things that kind of turns you off on it would it be like calls, emails, or LinkedIn DMs? Do you kind of favor any of those three, or not like one more than the other?
I kind of like email the best, just because it kind of gives some anonymity, right? So when you send a LinkedIn message, you still get a notification when somebody reads or views your message. Email, you can choose whether you want to send a read receipt if they ask for one. But it's more along the lines of like, if I want to reach out to you, then I will, but you have no way of knowing if your if your message got to me or not.
Right. Yeah, exactly. When it comes to cold outreach in general, it sounds like you like you said, emails for sure. But how likely would you say, just within like the last 6 to 12 months, um, how likely are you to schedule a meeting? Obviously, it depends on what your needs are at the time, right? Like some people just catch people at good times and bad times. But how likely are you to take a meeting from cold outreach?
Very unlikely. I would say I've done it once in the past 6 months.
Once, yeah. Do you mind me asking if it was a specific thing or?
I mean, honestly, it was actually more of a marketing message. So we used to subscribe to Blue Jeans. We transitioned over to Zoom. So it was
Mhm.
just a message from Blue Jeans that said, hey, we've made some tremendous improvements to our platform. Check out this case study, this white paper, take a look at our website. So it wasn't specifically like, hey, can I get some time on your calendar? It's like, I know you used to be a customer. Here are some of the great changes we've made. Would you be interested, in just taking a look? And then from that email, I responded to them and said, hey, I'd like to, have a deeper conversation about some of the changes, see it in action and things like that. So there wasn't really any expectation of a meeting, it didn't seem like. But I think that was probably the best way to go about it, because I was, they knew I had been a customer. So they knew, when we canceled, we had a conversation about these are some of the things that drove us to another platform. And now they're coming back and saying, we've made some changes. We'd like you to take another look.
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like you're more in favor of like, hey, get to the point for
Yeah.
one, right? And just like provide me with some information before we even like. There's really no need for, because a lot of the intro meetings, right, are very. It's you're not learning anything. You probably could have learned that just from the jump, right?
Right.
And it sounds like being a little bit more straight line. Is that along the right lines with you?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it kind of goes to understanding what I do. And if you don't know what I do, you can make an assumption based on the title, but maybe there's an introduction you can make at that point. Say, hey, I saw your title was director of technical training. What does that really look like? What are some of the challenges you face? And that may stir a conversation if I'm up for it. But if not, just making an assumption, that I'm staffing for executive HR positions is not going to cut it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Is there, you've got a really, like we talked about at the beginning, you've got a really extensive background here, with a lot of different companies. I'm sure you've received some really unique cold outreach, and maybe you haven't. Maybe I'm making a bad assumption right now, but is there anything in your years that you've been in the industry that has really stuck out to you? And maybe you did business with them, maybe you didn't, but you were like, I really remembered that for sure.
I mean, there's one that definitely sticks out. There's a company called OrgWide that does e-learning course development, and I guess their mascot is an e-learning ninja, right? So what the guy did was he sent me just a cold outreach email, but it had a video message attached, but it was like cartoonified. So it was like him, but he was talking as a cartoon. And then I would say, after a couple of days, I ended up with a stuffed ninja in my mailbox, and it was like, okay, I get it. This guy really wants to talk to me. So we had a conversation, but that's definitely going to stick out, I think, for a while.
That seems to be a constant with a lot of the people that we've talked to. We've talked to VPs of HR, L&D now, and then talent management as well. And it seems like the stuff that really sticks out is like the little gifts that will, it may not even be something that's that expensive. You don't need to spend a ton of money on something
Right.
to stick out, right? It's just something that is like thoughtful, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What are your general overall thoughts of LinkedIn outreach? It's because we've got a lot of conflicting information where it's like, oh, I love LinkedIn for this or that. But when it comes to when I connect with someone, I know what's coming. There's a pitch, they want to sell me on something, or maybe not. My introduction to you was really just like, hey, I'd just love to pick your brain a little bit because you're in this industry. What are your overall feelings about people using LinkedIn connections as a way to potentially sell you something as a form of cold outreach?
I think it kind of goes back to that making assumptions, right? So if you want to connect and you have a generic message that says, "Hey, we're in the same industry, we probably share a lot of connections," and then the next message that you send is, "Hey, I've got this great solution I want to sell you," I immediately unconnect with that person, because it's not genuine. The original request wasn't genuine. There wasn't any kind of substance to the reason you wanted to connect. It was because you wanted to sell me something. Alternatively, if we share connections, maybe you've had a conversation with the people that I'm already connected with, and they say, "Hey, Michael does this on a regular basis. You might want to reach out to him and see if he's interested." And then it becomes more personable because it's coming from a place that people understand what it is I do and have more of an idea of some of the challenges I might be facing. So it gives them some added context when they do reach out.
Right, right, exactly. Um, I know a lot of people or a lot of companies rather will use statistics or some type of like 75% of X does this when they work with us. How on a scale of like 1 to 5, how trusting are you of statistics when it comes specifically to cold outreach?
Very little. You see a lot of the ones that are like, "Oh, we worked with companies like Amazon and Apple." And it seems like they're just name dropping at that point.
Mhm.
So it's like, oh, if they're doing it, then maybe I need to be doing it too. And that's not really how it works, because they may have a completely different situation than I do. So name dropping or showing stats like that may not be relevant. So it's certainly not something that I put a lot of weight into.
Sure. Yeah. And I'm sure being with a company like Coca-Cola, you're getting a lot of like, oh, we worked with this big company and this
Uh-huh.
big company and this big company, right? So I'm
Right.
sure they try to, like you said, name dropping, I'm sure is super common. Um, is there any form, being in the L&D world, is there any form of marketing that really resonates with you? Maybe more so than the rest? And just to kind of get your mind thinking about it, like, you know, graphics, videos, just plain text? Is there anything that really resonates with you specifically?
So I think there's a couple of things. I do like seeing like marketing videos, especially when it comes to learning technology, so I can kind of get an idea of how it's going to work, and then I can start thinking, okay, is this something that I can apply to my everyday situation? Is it something that I could probably use? The other thing is case studies. So if you can send me a case study where somebody, it doesn't even have to be a similar situation, similar company or anything, but a situation, We had to train X number of people, we're trying to upskill salespeople, whatever it might be. You can give me a case study and I can read about it and understand, all right, this was the problem they had. Here's the solution that went into place. And then if it's worth a conversation, then I can reach back out. But if you can show the success of the product, then I think I'd be more willing to have a conversation rather than just saying, hey, we worked with X, Y, and Z, and these are the results we saw.
Yeah, and do you think that that's more or less relevant when it comes to L&D? Because I would assume, like you said, you were a teacher before, you're in education, and obviously you're in L&D now. And so, do you think that that's really specific to that industry, that where a lot of people just take things in differently, right? And so, do you think that that's really specific to that industry?
It might be, because I mean, if you think about learning and development overall, there's a couple of key areas that you're looking at, right? You're going to have onboarding, you're going to have that wherever you go. Leadership development is going to be wherever you go. And then it's looking at how do you tie data into performance, right? So those are some of the key areas that you're going to find. So a lot of people are kind of have those issues across the board. So how do you make your new hire programs more engaging? How do you make your leaders, challenge themselves to be better leaders in the future? How do you show them what does it mean to be a leader in the organization? And then looking back at your data is like, how are you measuring success? How are you demonstrating the impact that your learning organization has on the global organization, so that you can, get better investment in technology, that kind of stuff. I think those are common situations that you'll find across L&D. So any kind of solution that's tied to that, I think it's easier to demonstrate that value or potential value if you can showcase how you've done it somewhere else.